The DCAU is a universe that I often praise on this channel time and time again. Most of the time, it is because of the different series that we did get from this universe, but they actually had quite a few animated movies that did tie into this universe. And for the most part, those movies were pretty enjoyable. And honestly, some of them are even in my top 5 for comic book movies all time, whether that's live action or animation. And that's why today we're talking the DCAU movies ranked and explained. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. All right, the DCAU movies ranked and explained. So we have 7 different entries on this list, and obviously this is going to be very subjective as it is my opinion. However, I did do a little deep dive on the internet just to see where my personal rankings matched up with how the general audiences do feel about these films. And I will say, for the most part, we're pretty much on the same page. I might have a couple more drastic viewpoints on certain projects. However, again, for the most part, we are pretty much on the same page. So with that being said, coming in at number 7 on this list, we have Batman and Harley Quinn. Now, this movie, I will not lie to you, I do not like it at all. That is why I have it at number 7, and it is the only movie on this list that I genuinely do not like. I don't think they do anything particularly well. I think they do essentially everything very, very horribly. And to get more specific, this is a story in which Batman and Harley Quinn are forced to work together to try to stop Poison Ivy and her plans. However, the reason that this doesn't fit isn't because the whole ride-along theme is what I don't like between Batman and Harley Quinn. It's actually the opposite. You see, they did a Batman and Harley Quinn ride-along already in the DCAU. It happened in Batman the Animated Series in the episode Harlequin, and to me, they executed it perfectly in that episode. They had an amazing dynamic together. They had great humor, and you didn't lose the heart of Harley Quinn. The reason that Batman so often feels bad for Harley Quinn, that was all present in that episode. However, when you look at this movie, it seems that no one paid attention to the original series, because the original series laid out the blueprint on how to do a proper ride along between Harley Quinn and Batman. However, this just took it to a whole nother degree of horrible. They tried to make Harley Quinn into this incredibly funny character who makes jokes at the expense of Batman or Nightwing, and let's not mention the very questionable things that happened between Nightwing and Harley Quinn, which again, as a huge Nightwing fan, I absolutely hated seeing that on screen, and I'm sure a lot of fans felt the same way. If not for Harlequin being a thing, I don't think I would be as low on this movie as I am. However, it was a thing. It happened and it existed. So it's very hard not to draw comparisons to a story that this movie is trying to tell when that said story was already essentially told. You see, in this film, Batman is forced to team up with Harley Quinn to stop Poison Ivy. What happens in the Harley Quinn episode? Batman is forced to team up with Harley Quinn to stop the Joker. So yes, very, very similar situation, and the only difference is the banter works in Batman the Animated Series. The scenes work in Batman the Animated Series, and that's because they don't abandon the core values and the core characteristics of Harley Quinn just to try to make her more funny. In fact, you could argue, and I think a lot of people would agree, that Harley Quinn from Batman the Animated Series, and more specifically the episode Harlequin, was much funnier than in this film, where she was supposed to be funny, where they were pushing for her to be funny. It just, to me, felt very, very messy, and it didn't land at all. None of the jokes hit for me. Even the emotional moments did not hit, whereas in the original one, they did hit. Seeing Harley Quinn abandoned by the Joker, seeing that he wasn't even going to go save her before he blew up Gotham, that all had an emotional impact, and that led us to care more about the character of Harley Quinn. But if you look at this movie, what does she do? Tie up Nightwing to a bed and do you know what to him? Yeah, no. not a fan. Not a fan of anything that happened in this film. The action was very lackluster. The humor was horrible. The characterization of every single character in this movie outside of Poison Ivy was horrible. If not for Poison Ivy, honestly, I think I might rate this movie a 0 out of 10. However, I did at the very least enjoy her character. But with that being said, that is why, without a doubt, this movie comes in at last place. But moving forward, every single movie on this list I do enjoy, and it was pretty difficult to rank all of them because I absolutely love the DCAU minus the number 7 entry because it was just god awful. However, with that being said, coming in at number 6, we have Superman Brainiac Attacks. Yes, I have the only Superman film in the DCAU this low. Now, why is that? Let's first get into what I really enjoyed about this movie because there was a lot that I enjoyed about the movie. I enjoyed the dynamic between Superman and Lois Lane. Their bond getting stronger, their bond getting closer, and his struggle to get closer to her because as soon as this happens, she gets infected with this Kryptonian disease that Brainiac did cause. It was a form of kryptonite poisoning that he did use in his new body to try to kill Superman. However, Lois Lane was there because she was with Clark Kent. So because of that, Superman is feeling very responsible for what happened to Lois. He has to go on this journey to try to find a cure for her, and this leads him to the Phantom Zone, which was something else really cool that I found about this movie. Him diving into the Phantom Zone and us getting to see that. And the action in this movie was also pretty good. Everything with Lex Luthor was really good as well. This is by far my favorite version of Lex Luthor. So anything to do with him in the DCAU, I am going to absolutely love because they definitely do this character justice. Now, where this movie slightly falls off for me is the little side story between Jimmy Olsen and Mercy. It just felt weird to me, and he was trying to romance her and sweep her off her feet for some reason, and she was just kicking his ass left and right. So that felt a little weird. The other thing that I did not like, and again, this was just personal preference, is the fact that we finally got a confession from Superman to Lois Lane about who he is. The fact that he is indeed Clark Kent. However, this did not actually happen. It was a Phantom Zone projection. It was just a vision that the Phantoms in the Phantom Zone were putting Superman in and putting into his mind to try to keep him in the Phantom Zone so he could not return to Earth. However, the reason I have such an issue with this is because throughout the entire DCAU, Superman and Lois do end up together at the end of the original Superman the Animated Series, and they are together throughout Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. However, the one thing that we never get throughout the entire series was something that we were teased with in this movie, and that is Superman revealing to Lois Lane that he is Clark Kent. So the fact that we got baited with that and then never got it, that for me just makes me lose a lot of enjoyment for it. And instead of it being a cool little Easter egg or a cool little tease at what's to come in the future, it instead pisses me off and makes me pretty angry that we never got to see that confession. We never got to see the reaction from Lois Lane when she finds that out, especially because we've had so much development between Clark Kent and Lois Lane up to this point. So the fact that we never got that and instead all we got was a Phantom Zone projection and a Phantom Zone vision, that makes me feel really down on this moment and overall makes the movie a little lackluster in my opinion. The action towards the end is okay. It just seems like he defeated Brainiac just because the kryptonite ray that was such an issue for him earlier on that did give him some sickness seemed to not work because he did use some Fountain of Youth thing from the Phantom Zone. All in all, just wasn't enjoyable. I would say the latter part of this movie, it had potential to be much higher on this list, but I feel like with the lackluster moments in the tail end of this movie, I can't put it any higher. And especially because they teased us with Lois Lane finding out and then she never finds out, so I'm partially just pissed off about that. But with that being said, coming in at number 5, we have Justice League versus the Fatal Five. Now this movie, when it was first coming out, we really did didn't know much of anything about it, it felt very weird that they were just randomly bringing back the DCAU. However, I will say in watching it, I actually just rewatched it for this video, and it is pretty enjoyable. The action sequences were awesome. The way that they put the music in this movie and scored it similarly to how they did Justice League Unlimited just really made me smile. And as someone who grew up with the DCAU and shows like Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, seeing these characters return was really awesome in my opinion. And they did a lot of the characters justice. And the characters they had returning, in my opinion, were probably the best choice. Obviously, we know the Trinity is Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. You could argue having Flash or Green Lantern in there would also make sense. However, for this specific movie, Green Lantern would not make sense, and that's because it is primarily about another Green Lantern. So having Jon Stewart in it would feel very weird. I'm kind of glad they didn't have Hawkgirl in it, as any of you may know who follow me on this channel. I'm not a big fan of this version of Hawkgirl. I just don't like her. So the fact that she's not in it, I don't have an issue with that at all. Some of the other things that I do really like is everything to do with Arkham, seeing Starboy getting put in Arkham because they all think that he is mentally ill, which he kind of is. It's just his medicine from the future keeps him in check and keeps him able to stay in reality. He's a paranoid schizophrenic who has memory issues as well, so he has a lot of things going on mentally, and without those meds, you can definitely see how that drastically affects him. And even the Legion ends up telling him at one point, if you don't take your meds, you can't be a hero. It just won't happen. So this creates quite the dilemma for this character, and we see him, as I said, put in Arkham. And this is where some of my favorite moments happen in the movie, because we do see he is a very kind person. However, it is also Arkham Asylum, so some people in there are not very kind. So he does tend to get on the wrong side of some people. However, luckily for him, it seems he has made an ally, and that ally is Harvey Dent Two-Face. And let me just say, the interactions between Starboy and Two-Face were some of my favorite in the entire movie. It was absolutely hilarious and honestly very wholesome that Harvey decided to take this kid under his wing and try to make it so he could survive in Arkham. He was giving him advice, and not only that, when someone would try to mess with Starboy, Harvey would intervene and basically tell the prisoner, if you mess with him, you're gonna have another issue, and it's me. And then we do get some really funny banter between Starboy and Harvey, just about Harvey needing 2 servings, and then Harvey lashing out at Starboy, and then very quickly apologizing. Just overall, I really enjoyed those moments. Some of the other cool things with Arkham, we did see Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy in their attempted breakout after Starboy's powers did go a little crazy, but luckily Batman was there and he was able to stop them. This gave us a pretty cool little action sequence between Batman, Harley Quinn, and Poison Ivy. Overall, I really enjoyed this scene, and this movie had a lot of really cool action sequences, specifically for Wonder Woman as well, because they finally gave her a sword in this universe. It's actually the first time the DCAU has Wonder Woman wielding a sword, and it is so badass. I absolutely love it. She is probably my top 2 favorite characters in this entire movie. I just think she is really awesome. She is amazing combat scenes, and even some of her scenes between her and Jessica Cruz were really cool and impactful. How they do Superman in this movie, I don't have an issue with. They do show him as one of the world's greatest heroes. Combat with him was cool. Having Mr. Terrific be one of the other people in the Justice League and appearing in this movie was a solid choice in my opinion. One of the smartest people, if not the smartest person in the Justice League, and him using those T-spheres and showing that he is not just a brain, he also can fight and kick some ass. That was all really cool. Adding Miss Martian felt weird. And by weird, I don't mean her dynamic with anyone. In fact, I actually really enjoyed her dynamic with a lot of people, specifically Batman. And when he tells her, hey, I don't want to deal with kids anymore, training teenagers isn't my thing. And then she just shapeshifts into Tim Drake, and Batman is essentially left speechless. That was absolutely hilarious and highlighted why I enjoyed her in this film. However, the reason I said her being in the film is kind of an issue, and and doesn't really make sense, leads me into some of my issues with this movie and why I have it this low. Even though the highs were very high, some of the lows are very low. And getting right into it, Miss Martian shouldn't exist. You see, we've had Mars explored. That was literally how the DCAU essentially got kicked off in Justice League, with Martian Manhunter being captured by the people of Earth. And he was captured because his world was destroyed, and he was trying to come here to warn us. However, instead of taking that warning, we decided just to imprison him. And the reason this is an issue is because it is stated not only in that beginning episode, but also moving forward in the DCAU, that he is unequivocally the only Martian that exists. So how the hell is Miss Martian just randomly here? That's never explained, that's never told to us, and we never get any type of reasoning as to how that could possibly happen. Maybe she was kept in stasis, maybe she was off-world, imprisoned, something like that. Give us some explanation. I'm a nerd. I'm okay with a nerdy explanation. But if you give me no explanation and just expect, oh yeah, you know what? We just have another Martian. You know why? Because reasons. Yeah, I'm gonna have issues with that, and it's gonna annoy me, especially when the character has such good banter and such good dynamics with so many characters in this movie. It makes me pissed off because just explain it and I will accept it. Give me some explanation. It doesn't even have to be that good of an explanation, but they don't even try. And speaking of not trying, that leads me to one of my other issues with this film. And it seems to me whoever was one of the writers and producers of this film did not do their due diligence on the original series and Justice League Unlimited. How do I know that? You know how I mentioned Hawkgirl is not in this film, and although I was happy about that, they gave a throwaway line to explain why she wasn't in the movie. And you wanna know what they said and where she was? Oh, she's off-world. What world, you say? She's on Thanagar. Huh, why is that an issue? Oh, I don't know, maybe because Thanagar got destroyed. Yeah, do you remember the end of Justice League, the animated series, when they failed to create that hyperspace bypass? So they did know that the Gordanians would very likely win the war. And then in Justice League Unlimited, we do get it confirmed that the Gordanians did in fact win the war, and they blew up Thanagar. And not only that, there were only 4 or 5 survivors from Thanagar. So you can't even say, oh, Thanagar just may have set up a new planet, and oh yeah, that totally makes sense. No, it doesn't. They're not going to set up an entire new planet just for 5 people. That makes no sense. Again, do your homework. Say she was off-world with Green Lantern on whatever planet he was on with the other Green Lanterns, because they did say there was some type of war on Rand. So that would make sense. However, to me, it just seems like they didn't care enough to do any research at all, and instead thought, huh, she's Hawkgirl, she's a Thanagarian, we'll just say she's on Thanagar. Yeah, that doesn't work when you literally blew up the planet in the series that predates this. So come on, do a little bit of research. However, enough of my rant for that, at least. My other issue with this is something else that occurred in Justice League Unlimited. Supergirl goes to the future and she stays in the future. Why does she do this? Well, the technology is much more similar to what she was used to on Krypton, so it makes sense. You know what doesn't make sense? Her not appearing in this movie. This would have been not only the perfect moment to have a reunion between Superman and Supergirl, but it would have at least shown us what she's been up to since she's been in the future with Brainiac 5, since she joined the Legion. However, she's not in the movie at all. In fact, she's not mentioned one time. So you know what that tells me? The writers of this movie probably didn't even know that she was supposed to be in the future, which again, to me, irritates me. Do a little bit of homework before you make a movie about what I consider and what many people consider to be the greatest superhero universe we've ever seen on screen. It's not rocket science. Watch a couple episodes and then you'll be fine continuity wise. So it's because of all those reasons that I really do have this movie so low. One of the other issues I had is that at the end of the movie, Limelight or Jessica Cruz just seems to very effortlessly defeat the Fatal Five. However, we see the Justice League Trinity struggle to beat them one on one. No offense to Jessica Cruz, but you're never going to convince me that her, after just awakening her powers, because mind you, at the beginning of this movie, she wanted nothing to do with her abilities and essentially could not even use the lantern ring to its fullest capacity. You'll never convince me that she was just able to solo these five people who had the Justice League on their heels. No, that will never make sense to me. Making Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman struggle against these characters one on one, and then she swoops in and defeats all five. No, that goes into the old trope of putting certain characters down that we do know and love just to lift someone else up and show how cool they are. You could have done it in a better way, in a different way, that did not piss off some fans, especially fans of the Trinity, who would have an issue with her just being able to no diff all of these crazy big threats. So all in all, that is why I had to rate this movie this low. Otherwise, this movie could have easily been top 3 or maybe even top 2, because it did have some really good moments and some really high highs. Even the interactions between Starboy and Jessica Cruz were really enjoyable. But the amount of negatives for this movie are why I have it at number 5. But that being said, coming in at number 4, we have Batman Sub-Zero. Now, this movie was very enjoyable for many reasons. However, one of the reasons that I have it at number 4 and I could not put it lower is because this is the only film that has direct impacts later on in the DCAU. Let me explain. Although none of these films break canon, aside from Justice League versus the Fatal Five, as I just mentioned and ranted about, the movie Sub-Zero is directly canon. And although the other movies do not ever break canon, they're also never mentioned again in canon episodes. Whereas the events of this movie directly impact the New Adventures of Batman, which, as many of you know, was the sequel to Batman the Animated Series. So because of that, this film automatically has to be in the top 5 in my opinion, because it did contribute to the greater stories and the greater landscape of the DCAU as a whole. Now, some of the other really enjoyable things about this film: the visuals were awesome. Mr. Freeze was awesome in this film. He was pretty sympathetic. We could understand why he was doing what he was doing. We got some cool action sequences between Mr. Freeze and Robin when Barbara Gordon does get kidnapped. We get an appearance from Batgirl once again, which is always awesome to see. She had a cool action sequence as well, and then she does end up getting kidnapped by Mr. Freeze, who needs her blood in order to save his wife. And part of the reason I really like these moments is that Barbara Gordon acknowledges that her help is needed, and although this procedure would kill her, she still in some way does at least contemplate it, and we do know by the end of the film they do end up getting Nora Freeze help. And Mr. Freeze, in one of my favorite moments in the entire film, does inevitably turn good and chooses to save Batman, Barbara Gordon, and of course Nora Freeze. He tells Batman that the only thing that matters is that Nora gets out of here, and Batman in this moment, in his last effort to try to save Mr. Freeze, goes to save him, and Mr. Freeze just says, "No, leave me behind, let me die," and Batman does have to leave, and Mr. Freeze is presumed dead. Now, we do know, thanks to the events of the New Adventures of Batman, Mr. Freeze did survive this encounter. However, he does not get a happy ending. As any of you who watch the episode Cold Comfort in the New Adventures of Batman, you will know what ends up happening to him. And that does make this movie feel a little bit more sad, just knowing what does happen to Mr. Freeze. But all in all, it is still a very enjoyable movie. I feel like the reason I couldn't have it any higher is, although it did have some pretty cool action sequences, there wasn't anything major. It didn't have any great fighting sequences or anything like that. It was a movie that was predicated much more on the emotional weight and the emotional toll that all of this is taking on the characters. So all in all, I do think it is very fitting to have this film at number 4. But with that being said, coming in at number 3, we have Batman: Mystery of the Batwoman. So this movie was interesting. And by interesting, I mean they gave us a Batman mystery storyline. Yes, it's literally in the title, and it is just that, a mystery mystery storyline that sees Batman having to solve a mystery. And we watch him do this. We watch him uncover different clues. And we get to see in the mindset of Batman and how he deduces different things, how he comes to different conclusions. And we also see probably the smartest henchman in superhero film history, the one that opens the door as Batman is investigating. And he literally looks at Batman and instead of doing anything, closes the door, walks away, and one of the other goons says to him, "Is something wrong?" The guy just looks at him and says, "Nope." That is by far the smartest goon in superhero history. But aside from that, there were some other very enjoyable moments. Obviously, the main villains in this were the Penguin, Rupert Thorne, and Bane. Having Bane in this film was a really good choice. He was brought in to be the muscle of this organization and help solve this Batwoman issue. And Batwoman was someone who was constantly attacking the operations of Penguin and Rupert Thorne. This, however, did catch the attention of Batman because not only was she using the moniker of Batwoman and slightly staining his image because she did not care who got hurt or maybe even who got killed. Now, no actual confirmed deaths happened in this film, but you could argue that some people definitely died in all the different explosions and car crashes that she did cause. All in all, some of the most enjoyable parts were the mystery of the Batwoman and the fact that we didn't just know who the Batwoman was. In fact, even watching it, I could not guess who the Batwoman was. Yes, you could guess one person. However, then they would show you that it could potentially be another person. And as soon as you thought it was that other person, you would start thinking it's someone else, only to find out it was three different people, which to me was absolutely brilliant. And it even left Batman slightly baffled for a while. And following him connecting all these dots to the point where he does find out was very enjoyable and satisfying to see. Getting that final fight between Batman and Bane was also absolutely epic. It happening on the cruise ship right before it sinks was absolutely amazing and spectacular. The visuals in this movie were really good. The only negatives I really have was that aside from the Bane fight, there wasn't a whole lot of great action in this film, and I feel like the Bat family was slightly underutilized. Robin didn't really do much of anything, and Batgirl was only in it for a brief cameo, and her cameo felt slightly weird, and by weird I mean it was the dynamic of her trying to get with Bruce Wayne and Bruce Wayne just kind of casting her aside and literally saying, "Hey, I'm going in a tunnel," and then hanging up on her. So, not a huge fan of any of that, but all in all, still a very enjoyable movie, and that is why I have it at number 3. However, it definitely cannot touch the next movie because coming in at number 2 on the list of movies from the DCAU, we have Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. One of the best comic book movies ever made. Not just animated, not just from the DCAU. I'm talking best comic book movie ever. One of them. It is certainly top 5. It is spectacular. Bringing us the Joker back from the dead. Explaining how the Joker originally died in this series. Explaining what the Joker did to Tim Drake. What happened between all of them that night. Showing us those brutal flashbacks. And not only that, giving us one of my absolute favorite exchanges of dialogue in the entire DCAU when the Joker finds out that Bruce Wayne was indeed Batman, and then the Joker decides to tell Batman that he knows he is Bruce Wayne, and you have that iconic moment in the theater where he's talking about behind all the stern and batarang, he's just a kid crying out for mommy and dad. That was amazing. Every time I watch that scene, I get chills. It was spectacular. Absolutely amazing. Great. And then the moments that followed between Batman and Joker were amazing. The fact that Batman technically lost this battle was also really cool. This is technically their final showdown. So the fact that the Joker did win this fight was also very impactful. And Batman was at the Joker's mercy. It was only the Joker's arrogance that led to him getting killed by Tim Drake, which again is another aspect of this movie that is so amazing. The Joker's arrogance is what led to his downfall, what led to him being taken down, not by the Batman, but by someone trained by the Batman, by someone the Joker felt he had manipulated so well to the point where that person would kill Batman. But all of that blew up in his face. And not only that, but then getting to see the Joker invading the Batcave. Finally, after so many years, taking Batman down and subjecting him to being under the influence of the laughing gas. And we see that affect Bruce Wayne. And not only that, we see the effects that this is having on Terry McGinnis, the new Batman. And after he finds all of this out, he is left to try to take down the Joker, Gotham's greatest villain ever. And the way he does this is actually really interesting. And he even highlights and emphasizes how he isn't the original Batman. He's different. He's going to fight dirty. He's going to taunt the Joker, which thoroughly pisses the Joker off. He is literally just rage baiting the Joker at the end, and it works. It makes the Joker so frazzled that he loses control. So much so that in his final moments, about to take out Terry McGinnis, he doesn't think about that ring that he lost, about where he lost it. And then Terry McGinnis reaches up and fries the microchip on his neck, connecting him to Tim Drake and destroying the Joker. This to me is just one of, like I said, the best comic book movies we've ever gotten. The stories, the visuals, the action was just so amazing in my opinion. All the impactful and emotional moments that do happen, just all in all, a really great movie. And I have no negatives for this movie. To me, this movie is absolutely perfect. But speaking of perfect, coming in at number 1, we have Batman, Mask of the Phantasm. Now, this movie, when you talk about perfect, this gives us a great balance of action, of emotion, and mystery. This follows the story of the Phantasm systematically killing mob bosses, and Batman has to follow the trail and try to solve the mystery. A Batman mystery storyline is always going to be something very enjoyable. He is the world's greatest detective, so anytime they do incorporate that into a movie, I am going to definitely enjoy that. But they definitely go above and beyond that, because not only do they give us one of the best Batman mystery storylines we've ever seen on screen, they also give us the greatest romance and the greatest tragedy we've ever seen for Batman, in my opinion. And that romance is with Andrea Beaumont. And we see through the medium of flashbacks and present day the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Andrea. And we see that he actually proposed to her. But not only that, he, for the first time ever, was going to give up being Batman before even becoming Batman. So much so that we see him at his parents' grave. We see him begging them for permission, begging them to accept that maybe I can just give more money to the city so they can hire more police, so that they can keep the city safe. I didn't count on this. I didn't count on being happy. And we see him in the rain crying in front of his parents' grave, just asking for a sign. And then Andrea Beaumont shows up and she says, maybe they already have. Maybe I'm the sign that they sent. And all of these scenes are just so emotional and show the heart of Batman and show us that Bruce Wayne at his core doesn't want to be Batman. He feels the need to be Batman because of the promise that he made after his parents were killed. But in this moment, that promise isn't what mattered most to him. His happiness, the love he was feeling mattered more. And that's why this movie is so impactful, because it was the first instance that Batman might have truly given up being Batman for very good reasons. However, she is forced to leave, so she has to reject and give back his engagement ring. And after this, we do see he does decide to put on the cape and cowl. And one of the other awesome moments is when Alfred first sees him put on the cape and cowl and is somewhat scared and intimidated by this. That was really cool. And then we do see at the end of the film, Batman does find out that this was indeed Andrea, as she is going to kill the Joker because he was one of the mob bosses back in the day before he became the Joker. He was actually a hitman for those mob bosses, and he was the person that actually killed her father, and that is the reason she became the Phantasm and was exacting all of this revenge. And this is something that Batman does sympathize and empathize with, and still tries to reason with her. He's not telling her that she has to get turned in or anything like that. He's just asking her. No, he's begging her to stop, to just come back to him. They can work it out together. And seeing Batman in this emotional state was just really tragic. And I think also one of the other enjoyable aspects of this film was the inclusion of the Joker. I feel like him being in this movie as well was really awesome. Not only deducing that this masked killer was not the Batman, it was indeed someone else, but going so far as to laying traps for the Phantasm, and they almost worked. he was able to destroy the little hand weapon thing that she was using throughout most of the movie. And he did have her on her heels. Now, we do see that the Joker is about to kill Andrea, and I think that is actually really cool that the Joker managed to get the upper hand on this person and just shows you how capable, especially this version of the Joker is. But Batman does swoop in and save her. She disappears, and that is what leads us to getting that confrontation between Batman and Joker. Some amazing dialogue exchanges between the two of them. It was great, amazing action sequences. And then when the Joker is defeated, Andrea returns. The Joker says, "I already surrendered, tell her, Batman," and she does not care. She is going to absolutely kill the Joker. And then Batman, one final time, pleads with her and just tries to get her to stop, and she refuses. Batman then gets blown away out through a sewer and then has to watch from a distance as the city explodes, with Andrea and the Joker presumably in this explosion. Now, we do know the Joker did inevitably survive, and we also do know that Andrea also survived. We know this because of the end of the film, and she does somewhat appear in Justice League Unlimited in the future, and she is hired by Amanda Waller. But all in all, it is still very tragic, and tragic to know that she never did get that happy ending. And it's even more tragic to know that she was the one hope that Bruce Wayne had of not becoming the Batman, of having a happy ending. And instead, that was taken away. And not only that, one of the best exchanges of dialogue between a hero and another character also happens in this movie, and that's between Alfred and Batman. After the presumed death of Andrea, Batman is feeling really down, and Alfred comforts him. And Alfred said, "No matter what, you could not have saved her." And he talks about the abyss, the darkness that Batman goes through, and how worried he has always been for Batman, and that Batman would lose himself in that monster. But for some reason, he never has. And for some reason, he has been able to at least stay in the light a little bit. But Andrea, she wasn't able to do that. She fell into darkness long ago, and no one, not even you, could save her. The overall weight and emotion from that scene was just spectacular. The dynamic between Alfred and Bruce Wayne is one of my absolute favorites in all of comics. So obviously, any type of emotional scene like that is definitely going to hit hard for me, and I am going to absolutely love it. So that is why, to me, without a doubt, the best movie in the DCAU is Batman Mask of the Phantasm. But what do all of you think? Which movie do you think is the best movie in the DCAU? Do you agree with my rankings? If not, how would you rank these movies? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.